All right, so ready to dive into something kind of different today. We're talking funeral homes and social media.
Yeah, not exactly two things you'd picture together, are they?
Not really. Like,
Yeah.
what do those two worlds even have to do with each other? Right? Which is exactly why I wanted to dig into it, especially with this article you sent over, Why Generic Social Media is Hurting Your Funeral Home.
It's an interesting one for
It
sure.
really got me thinking.
Yeah, and the thing that struck me was, it wasn't just about like algorithms or anything like that. It was about authenticity, which I thought was interesting
Yeah,
for this topic.
and this is from a publication called Director's Corner, which focuses specifically on funeral home marketing.
Right.
So they're basically saying, just tossing up any old post is actually hurting these businesses more than it's helping.
Well, yeah, and it makes sense if you think about who you're reaching, right? I mean, it's not like people are scrolling through Facebook looking for, you know, funeral homes necessarily.
Right.
These are families that are dealing with loss, with grief.
Yeah, they need a different kind of support.
And they need a different kind of connection.
Absolutely.
Compassion.
It's like when you see those like stock photos of people laughing around a conference table,
Right.
it just feels inauthentic.
Hmm.
But in this case, it's even more sensitive.
It's way more sensitive. And in fact, this article argues that it can even be disrespectful in this context.
Yeah.
When you're talking about something as deeply personal as saying goodbye to somebody, using these generic, social media tactics just doesn't really work.
Okay, so that's where things get really interesting for me. Because think about it. Funeral homes, they're all about creating these incredibly personalized experiences.
Mhm.
Tribute videos, curated music playlists, even themed memorial services.
Oh, yeah.
They're going above and beyond to make each farewell unique.
Right.
But then they go and use the same social media playbook as everyone else.
The disconnect there is huge.
It's a disconnect.
Yeah.
So how do you bridge that gap? How do funeral homes use social media to connect with people in a way that's authentic and meaningful, given the sensitive nature of what they do?
I think it starts with changing the way you view social media in this context. So instead of thinking about it as like a promotional tool,
Yeah.
think about it more as a way to connect with people on a deeper level, to share stories that resonate.
So instead of like we offer burial services, it's more like, what?
Right, exactly.
Give me an example of a story that would really land.
Well, what if, for instance, a funeral home shared a story about how they helped a family honor their loved one's, I don't know, maybe a passion or something?
Huh.
Like maybe the deceased was a avid gardener.
Yeah.
So the funeral home incorporated their favorite flowers into the service, or maybe helped the family plant a tree in their memory.
Okay, so it's about showcasing the heart behind it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and showing that personal touch. The article actually uses a phrase for this. It's called behind the scenes content.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah, and it's basically about pulling back the curtain and showing the care and compassion that goes into every little detail.
So less about the what, more about the why.
Exactly.
So it's about showing that human element right,
Yeah.
which totally makes sense. But they also talk about sharing like helpful resources and information,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was interesting. It's not something you necessarily think about with funeral homes, right?
Right.
But it makes sense in the context of, building trust and connection.
Well, and, death and dying are things that everybody's going to deal with at some point.
Right.
So why not be a resource for people, even before they need you? Think about, like, what kinds of questions or concerns might people have
Okay, yeah.
about, like, funeral planning or grief support.
Like, what do I do when a loved one passes away at home?
Exactly.
Or like, where can I find grief counseling in my area?
Yeah, or like, how do I even begin to plan a funeral?
Right.
There's so many different things that you don't really think about until you're in that situation.
Exactly.
So sharing things like blog posts or articles or even just links to local resources
Mm-hmm.
can be really, really helpful for folks. And it positions the funeral home as, kind of a trusted guide.
Yeah. Like they're anticipating people's needs.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of anticipating needs, reminds me, visuals.
Oh, yeah.
Again, seems obvious for social media in general, but
Yeah.
how does that translate to this particular field?
It's about setting the tone
Yep.
and creating an atmosphere. So instead of just saying, we offer a serene and comforting environment, show people
Mhm.
high quality photos of the space,
Yeah.
maybe some landscaping,
Mhm.
the decor. It all contributes to, painting that picture.
And even going back to that behind the scenes idea,
Yes.
like showing the process of creating a floral arrangement.
Exactly. Or like setting up for a memorial service.
Yeah.
And video can be really powerful for this too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know, like a short, tastefully done video tour of the funeral home.
Yeah,
Could be really reassuring for someone who's never been inside one before.
totally. Okay, so we've got storytelling, we've got helpful resources, visuals. What about engagement? Like, how do you encourage that on social media when you're dealing with such a sensitive topic?
It's definitely a balancing act.
Yeah.
You don't want to be insensitive
Right.
or seem like you're trying to like capitalize on people's grief or
Like,
anything.
no, like this post, if you've ever lost someone you love.
Exactly. Not the right move.
Yeah, not the move.
But you can still interact with people
Yeah.
in a meaningful way.
Okay.
It's about finding those opportunities to like foster a sense of community and shared experience.
So, like, what does that look like practically?
Well, like, you know, instead of directly asking people about, you know, their personal experiences with loss,
Mm-hmm.
what if you shared like an inspirational quote about loss and invited people to kind of reflect on it in the comments?
Oh, I like that. Or they could share a piece of music that's often played at services and have people share songs that, bring them comfort during times of grief.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Create a
yeah.
space for reflection and connection
Yeah.
without being intrusive.
They also mentioned contests and giveaways, which feels a little, I don't know,
Yeah.
weird in this context.
Yeah, it can be tricky.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of thought.
Yep.
But like, instead of giving away a free funeral, which would be a little
Strange.
what if a funeral home partnered with a local grief support group
Okay.
to offer a scholarship
Okay.
or a donation in someone's memory?
That's a really nice idea.
It still achieves that community engagement goal,
Yeah.
but in a way that's appropriate.
And it's actually giving back in a way that feels very much in line with that whole,
Yeah.
support system.
Right, exactly.
So it's not just about posting. It's about responding to comments,
Yeah.
engaging in dialogue. So
It's a two-way street. You got to be present. You got to be responsive.
it goes back to that authenticity thing.
100%.
Yeah.
Because people can tell when you're being genuine,
Yeah.
and when you're not.
Especially with this, right?
Especially with this. This is where it's like, super, super important to be authentic.
It's interesting. I never would have thought about the nuances of this.
Yeah, it's not something you think about every day.
But it's so fascinating how even these, kind of traditional industries
Mm-hmm.
are finding ways to connect with people in the digital age.
Well, and it makes you realize that at the end of the day, people are just looking for connection, right?
Totally.
They want to feel seen and heard and understood.
So we talked about what funeral homes can do,
Mm-hmm.
but what's the bigger takeaway here? Like, what can other industries learn from this?
Don't be afraid to be human.
Okay.
Like, show your heart.
Yeah.
Be genuine.
It's about connecting on that human level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is so important.
In any industry, but especially this one.
One industry that I've seen doing some really interesting things is healthcare.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I've seen some hospitals and clinics doing really cool stuff with social media to connect with patients, which I thought was really interesting.
What kind of things have you seen?
Well, like, instead of just posting, kind of dry medical advice all the time, some hospitals are sharing, like, patient stories. Like, stories about people overcoming illnesses.
Yeah.
Or heartwarming moments
Mhm,
between, like, doctors and patients, things like that. It humanizes it a little bit.
Absolutely, because it reminds you that there are actual humans
Yes.
behind those scrubs. Right.
And it's not always, happy and heartwarming.
Right.
I've also seen them address some really difficult topics, like mental health,
Yeah.
addiction, things like that.
It's so important.
But they do it in a way that's really sensitive and informative.
Because those are things that people don't always feel comfortable, like, talking about, openly.
Yep. Right.
Exactly.
So if there's a place online where they can go and feel safe to do that.
Yeah, and feel informed.
Yeah.
And you know me, I love a good behind-the-scenes look at things.
Oh, of course.
I've seen hospitals use social media to kind of give people a peek into what goes on,
Okay.
like introducing the team in the neonatal intensive care unit, for example,
Oh.
or showing all the work that goes into prepping for a complex surgery,
Oh, wow.
that kind of thing.
So it kind of like demystifies those spaces a little bit,
Totally.
which can be scary.
Yes, very much so.
Hospitals can be scary.
And it builds trust
Right.
when you can see what's happening, right?
Transparency,
Transparency.
like you were saying with the funeral homes,
Yeah.
showing the behind the scenes.
It's about being that trusted guide.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Whether you're a funeral home helping people navigate grief or a hospital guiding someone through a healthcare journey.
It's about being a resource for people.
Yes, exactly. And providing that support.
It all comes back to being that authentic voice.
Right, because people, they just want to know that you care.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's not about selling something.
No, exactly.
It's about showing up and being present.
It's about showing up as a human.
Yes,
Yeah.
as a human, which it's easy to forget sometimes, especially in this digital world that we live in.
Very easy.
Very, very easy.
So as we kind of wrap things up here, what's the one thing you hope people take away from this? What's the big kind of overarching message?
I would say don't be afraid to be yourself.
Mm.
Don't be afraid to be authentic. I think in a world that often feels really impersonal, seeking out genuine connection is so, so important. And I think that applies, whether you're a funeral home director, a healthcare provider, or just a regular person, scrolling through Instagram.
Just be a human.
Be a human.
I love that. I think that's a perfect place to end it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, it's time for us to sign off, but we want to hear from you.
What are your thoughts on all of this? Have you seen any other industries that are using social media in really thoughtful and unexpected ways?
Hit us up.
Let us know.